Oh boy, I am so excited. Woo! Hello! We're here at Geneva State Forest, and we're here with the Alabama Treasure Forest Association Geneva State Forest Tour. We're going to climb on a tractor, and we're going to go look at the forest. So, hey, come with us.
Horse riding, ATV riding. There's a hiking trail that goes around the lake. We've got a group of volunteers that meet regularly, that work with all the public, trying to keep us from having recreational conflicts. And then we have the forest management that goes on. Normally we're harvesting from 300 to 600 acres of timber per year, or reforesting of that amount. And hopefully y'all are going to get to see that today. This morning what I want to do, we're going to be on the tour for about 3 hours. So if you need to use the restroom, this would be the time to do it. We'll have drinks on the tour. So if you will, let's just get our stuff, and in the next 10 minutes we'll make our way over to the wagons and load up. While we're out here, we want to make sure that we're watching where we walk. We've got all kinds of little critters crawling around, and
some big ones,
and big ones.
I got a picture of a 12
just be careful where you step, and watch out for everybody else too. Okay. This is Harold Wise. He's our adjacent landowner here. We've got a campground adjacent to the place, and you can walk through the trail right there, and he's actually got a camp house that has got something besides porta toilets. So if y'all are more than welcome to walk over there too and use the restroom. But let's say in 10 minutes we're going to load up, okay? Okay. Everyone, this is Richard Tharp. He's a biologist with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. He works the District 4. And this is Chris Cotton. He actually works here at Geneva State Forest and at Blue Springs Management Area. And they're going to give you a talk that speaks today on wildlife habitat improvement.
Thank y'all for being here. Glad y'all came out this morning. Got a nice, cool day for it. So we hope y'all have a good day. And again, thank y'all for coming. We are going to talk about wildlife habitat improvement, and that can cover a wide array of topics and techniques. And we're just going to touch on some of those and explain a little bit about what they're good for and what they can do. And while you're here on the Geneva State Forest, everything that we mentioned, they're doing here on this forest somewhere. So somewhere in your tour, you're probably going to see these techniques that we're talking about. So keep your eyes open and you'll see them. First stop is right here on a what I term as a wildlife opening or a food plot, a lot of people call it. So that's the first topic that we're going to talk about. And my first question to you is, why would you want to plant a wildlife opening or a food plot? Don't be bashful. I'll call on harvest. Okay, that's exactly right. A lot of people plant it so they can see what's there, particularly deer, and harvest particular deer. Okay. Any other reasons? Okay, provide an additional food source during the leaner times of the year, especially late winter is one of the weaker seasons we have that provide natural food. So this is a food source for when those leaner times are here. Those are two excellent reasons, and that's what I was hoping y'all would say. Well, one of the things on supplemental plantings or wildlife openings that you have to consider is location and size, where you put a food plot and how big you're going to make it. And a lot of that has to do with economics, what you can afford as far as what you're working with. I say locate them in travel corridors where most of your wildlife animals are going to be moving, and a lot of times those are located in along streams, rivers, creeks, things like that. Animals seem to move toward those areas because they have been left uncut for many, many years. They just get used to traveling those areas, travel corridors, so that's a good place to locate a wildlife opening. In wildlife openings, of course, you're going to plant things, and in this one here, you can't see it a lot yet, but if you were to walk out there, you're going to find this plant right here in abundance out there. Is anybody starting to close up already? Does anybody know what this is? Okay, looks like a mimosa. Okay.
Looks like a partridge pea.
Looks like a partridge pea, that's exactly right. This is a partridge pea plot, and a partridge pea is just a plant that produces some small pods, and it's a legume, produces those pods, and it's a very good quail food source. So this is basically what this small area here is aimed at, is to provide food and cover for quail. All right. Also, there are many other types of plants you can plant in a wildlife opening or food plot. I'm not going to cover them all. I mean, you can go to any feed and seed store and spend as little or as much as you want on different plantings. But there are species-specific plantings where if you're managing for deer, things that you can plant that will benefit those more. Things for quail, things for turkey, and there's things that work for multiple species. So learn about those particular plants and pick what's going to benefit you and the animal that you're wanting to manage the most. All right. One of the things you need to do in a wildlife opening or food plot is think about your soil considerations. What kind of soil do you have? What do you need to do? Well, does anybody know what this is?
It's a soil
test box. That's exactly right. If you know about this, then that's good. A lot of people don't utilize these, and that's a big no-no. This is just a box that you can take a sample out of your food plot or wildlife opening and send it to a lab, and they're going to send you back the results of how much fertilizer you need for a particular crop, how much lime, and that sort of thing. One of the things that it tells you is the pH of the soil. pH of the soil is basically a numerical value from 1 to 14, with 7 being neutral to tell you how acidic or how alkaline your soil is. And of course, plants have to grow in particular soils depending on how acidic and all that is. It's a measure of the hydrogen ions in the soil. pH scale is a logarithmic scale. It's a 10 scale. So if your soil came back as 4.5, compared to a 5.5, it's 10 more times acidic than a 5.5, just kind of give you a reference point. Most plants grow better toward a neutral soil, which is a 7, of course, right in the middle. And that's where you want to try to get your soil. Well, how do you get it if it's too acidic? How do you get it toward the alkaline end? Well, you have to put lime out there. And why would you do that? Well, we're going to do a little. Who's very strong? Who's strong? Ma'am, you look strong. Why don't you take those apart for me right there? Could you do that, please? Just take that off right there for me, okay? I'll give you about 30 seconds. Work on that magic trick right there. See if you can get that off. Oh, come on now. Use those muscles and take that off of there. Can't do it? How about, where's the strong man at? Come here, sir. Clint. This is Clint. Everybody give him a round of applause. Take that off there. Thank you for trying. I don't want you to tear my equipment up now.
You want me to get it apart, don't you?
Are bound to the soil particles when your soil is too acidic, just like this lock and this bound together. And how you get them apart, how do you get these apart? It's with a key. Okay? You know what this key represents? Lime. That's exactly right. You put lime in your soil, it's going to unlock those nutrients that your plants need, and they're going to be available to the plants then. Okay? Thank y'all for working my little magic demonstration there. All right. So you have to lime to get the pH up where it needs to be so your plants can get those nutrients they need. Otherwise, they're bound into the soil and they will not be available to your plants. Did you know that if your soil sample comes back with an acid rate of 4.5, that 70% of the nutrients that you put out there in fertilizer are unavailable to the plants? In other words, 70% of the money you spent on fertilizer is flushed down the toilet. Okay? At 6.5 acidic rate, 20%. So you're approaching. I'd rather have 80% being available than 30%. Microorganism activity is reduced in acidic soils. Legumes can't fix nitrogen. What kind of lime do you need? Two forms, calcitic and dolomitic, and the only difference is dolomite lime is high in magnesium. I'm going to stop right there and let Chris go because I know I'm taking all the time. Jump on, Chris.
I guess my topic, prescribed fire, and you're going to hear that. I know there's a whole topic on prescribed fire, so I'm just going to touch on it briefly and what it does really from a wildlife standpoint. I think the topic later is going to be on a timber standpoint. But one of the reasons we burn, and you'll actually travel through some burned areas that we've done recently, is for wildlife, it brings the vegetation back to an early successional state. And when it starts growing back, it's young and tender, and it produces a lot of good browse for wildlife, deer, turkey, and everything. It also diversifies your plant growth, what's coming back up there, which is good for each different type of species that you got. The quail's not going to like it the same thing as a deer, or he may prefer something a little bit different. It also increases what type of seed you're going to have out there, what's coming back up in the litter layer. A lot of times you'll burn something like this right here, and what you'll see coming back up is a lot of ferns. Well, if you walk out there now, you're not seeing any ferns, but that seed is in the litter layer. It also increases insects. Insects are very important for quail, turkey. When they come through here, that's basically what young turkey poults eat. That's the first thing they eat is seeds and insects, grasshoppers, crickets, stuff like that. Burning also is very important because it puts nutrients back in the soil. Everything that you burn up, this plot right here, for example, whenever we built this plot, we took a dozer and we pushed off all the topsoil. That really is not good, but if you was to burn that, all that slash and stuff right there, all that nutrients is going back in the soil right there. So it helps, and maybe our plan is to extend this plot and make it a little bit bigger, and I guarantee you that side will produce more than this side would. There was a recent study done at Tall Timbers Research Station on turkeys, and it said that a turkey hen would hardly ever go in a place that wasn't burned within 2 to 3 years. A lot of turkey hunters I know love burning this time of year. We've actually got some guys that love it too much. They set stuff on fire and it's arson, and it causes a lot of headaches for our guys over there. But prescribed burning is a very important tool. It's very cheap compared to other, say, mowing, mulching, something like that. And it's kind of a more bang for your buck type thing. And that's pretty much all I got on burning. I know we're going to run short of time.
Touch on two things.
What's the latest anyone should burn, not to disturb nesting and everything?
Well, it really depends. I haven't read the whole article, but it did talk about nesting, and a lot of, I know turkeys will re-nest. You can burn and they'll come back and they'll re-nest. It really just depends on that particular bird. Most of the time, the benefit outweighs the negative. Because if you never burn and your habitat grows up, gets too thick, and like I said, those hens, turkeys will never go in there, then they're not using that to nest. So you may mess up 1 year of nesting, but you're going to gain more in the long run.
Any more questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question about putting lime out there.
Okay.
Is there a danger that you over lime and the pH goes over 7?
That is a possibility. Your soil sample will give you the rate that you should, so many tons per acre, and I recommend that you follow that, but you can over lime, and if you go toward the alkaline end of the scale, you're reducing what your plants can do. Just like our black belt soils in Alabama will only grow certain types of plants because it's too alkaline. So yes, sir, you can go too far to the other end of the scale.
I see. So you have to be around 7.
That's where you want to be.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Exactly right.
And a lot of times when you fill out that soil box, you'll put in there what you want to what you want
species you're
to,
gonna
what species you want to plant. Say I put partridge pea on there, they'll send you back your results, and it'll say, okay, you need to add this many pounds per acre of lime and fertilize, and they'll get you right where you need to be. Because each species is just a little bit different what they would prefer. Partridge pea may prefer a 7, whereas maybe a wheat may be just a little bit under that.
Practices. For instance, burning gopher tortoise. He has to have that to survive. We have gopher tortoises here on the state forest, and that's just a benefit that they receive from all the burning they do out here. All right, I'm going to talk about herbicides real quick, or chemicals, and you don't have one of these books. Unfortunately, I can't be here all day, but Chris will be here. If you want any of these publications that we show or talk about, Chris, if you'll take a pad and get their information, address, we'll be glad to send you one. This is non-native invasive plants of the southern forest. If you don't have one of these, be glad to provide you one. This is a lot of the plants that we're trying to rid Alabama of that aren't beneficial to wildlife or pretty much anything else. In fact, they're a nuisance to about anything that we do. But why do we use chemicals or herbicides? They get a bad name. A lot of people think, oh, they spray out there, they're killing everything. Not necessarily. Chemicals can remove unwanted species, these that are listed in this book. You can select herbicides to remove particular plants and leave particular plants. Let's say you want to leave your legumes. There's sprays that will do that. So you can get selective herbicides. Of course, they're non-selective that you spray over a clear cut that pretty much burns everything to the ground. Not necessarily a bad thing for right then, but the benefits that you get after that are very positive because you get a flush of growth that a lot of animals need and utilize. Chemicals can be used to maintain the habitat in a particular stage. We figure that a forest has 4 stages. You start with stage 1, which is bare dirt. 2, grasses and weeds, which would almost be like a wildlife opening. 3 is seedlings and brushy vegetation. This is kind of in a 3-5 stage because we do have a forest over the top of it here. Stage 4 is young trees, and stage 5 is more of a forest. But if you wanted to keep a particular tract of land or a portion of a property in stage 2, grasses and weeds, you can do that with chemicals. You can select the right chemicals that will keep the shrubby competition out of there and trees and keep it in herbaceous vegetation. That's what chemicals can do for you. All right, how do you get them out there? Broadcast, spot spray. That's what a lot of people utilize to get rid of some of this junk. They go in a creek bottom that's full of privet or something like that, hack and squirt. Machete, give it a little squirt of juice in there, and that one's toast. Our injection, make tools that you go along and jam into the trunk of a tree, injects the chemical in there, and it may take it 2 or 3 years, but it's gone. That's how you can get it on the ground. Of course, you got helicopters that'll spray it all over and all that stuff too. But all right, that's all about just very briefly about herbicides. But any questions?
What about if you have like a stream or something going through?
Okay.
Is that going to hurt anything?
In some situations, yes. You always want to read labels, and if you're uncomfortable, unfamiliar, consult somebody that's certified in herbicide use. And either get them to do it for you or to guide you or whatever. But yes, some chemicals can damage streams, fish, that sort of thing. So you have to read those labels and see what's safe, and you have to use them properly. You can't use chemicals. Not only is it going to provide some food and stuff out here, it provides edge, which is the habitat around the food plot where most animals make their living, on the edge. Animals don't live out in these food plots a lot. Otherwise, every time we walked out there, we'd see one. We don't. They make their living in the transition between forest and another type of habitat. So, creating edge, also providing food source. But there's really no rhyme or reason, to a size. It's what you can. I've got a food plot book over here. I'll give you, and it'll tell you about that. And you're welcome to one of them and read up on it. But I mean, everybody else, are we done? Okay. Should have stopped us earlier.
If y'all will, let's load back up. about 5 minutes. And when, you know, you got longleaf seedlings, you got loblolly seedlings, there's a lot that you can do with longleaf that you can't do with loblolly. And I wanted to point out a few of those things on this tour. Right here is one of the longleaf seedlings. It's starting to come out of the grass stage. Easily. If that candle or bud is elongating, so you can tell that one elongated probably to 4 inches. You can kill it when you run fire through it at that point. But they were about 1 inch long. We sent the fire through fast. We had the same type fuels. There were warm season grasses. Some of the that burn, they close up around the bud and they protect it and keep it from killing it. So then the fire went through, and as you can see, all this it's greened up, and it's killed a lot of these species that we don't like in our forest stands that create a bad wildfire hazard. One of the species is right here. This is dead. This is yopine. It's in the holly family. It's a real waxy plant. And you can see over there in that stand that we just left, this is getting pretty thick, and if fire gets in it, it can get pretty intense too. And when we go through the stand, you can see a lot of the warm season grasses. There's a lot of their third growing season, and you can see they're coming out of the grass stage. You can see them, there's some of them out here that's 4 feet high. But after this burn, I think we stimulated a lot of them to coming out of the grass stage. And another thing I was going to point out, you know, take care of the brown spot problem. It burns the needles off, and then the seedlings can develop. And that's about really all I've got to say here.
3 or 4 feet tall there. How big were they when you burned? How tall were they when you burned?
And the bud was up about 1 inch, and since we burned it that day, that bud further elongated, and then it developed and started putting on the needles. And then, you know, it was actually had a bud for the limb there too. So that seedling there come out of the grass stage last year, come up to that high. And you can see right here we had a lot of loblollies. There's some of the loblolly that live, but very few. And eventually we'll wipe them all out. They can't cut the fire, not in that. Everybody's asking me the age is about, it's right at 80 years old. There's trees out here that are younger, and there's trees out here that are older. But in 2000, I believe it was 2009, we had the American Recovery Act that came about with the stimulus package. And they were needing things to do in Alabama to create work. One of the problems that we have with longleaf pine in general is the getting the seedlings to replant, because we have a hard time with the seed sources. There's not many areas where they can get seed, and then longleaf pine normally doesn't have a good seed crop, but maybe 1 out of every 7 years. So basically the bottleneck with producing longleaf pine is the seed. So an idea that we came up with as far as the Stimulus Recovery Act was to come here at Geneva State Forest and mulch some of these areas that were too growed up, so that they would have areas that they could go in and collect for seed, so that we would have enough seed in the southeast to serve the need of the seedling demand. And back in 2009, if you look at this ephemeral pond down here, you can see the Yo Pond and how high it is. Some of it's 15 feet high, 15 and 20 feet high. And that's terrible. When you're trying to burn something like that, and I've got a lot of experience trying to, it's either too dry to burn it, and it creates a fire that's too hot, or it's too wet and you can't even get a fire to go through it. It just is terrible. So an alternative to that, in my opinion, was sending the mulching machines out here. And what we did, it was in 2009, November, we had two different types of mulching machines that worked on the state forest. And one of them was the skid steer machines with blades. The other type was the skidder type machines, the big huge machines, and they had roller heads on the front of them with hammers. And they was just, the actual machine that worked in this area was the skid steer with the blades. And I'm telling you, it was 15 feet high in a lot of places out here. And they just worked at it day by day. We were paying them anywhere from $175 to $250 an acre. That was because there was a grant from the stimulus money. And they came in here. There was 139 acres in this stand, and we got it completely mulched. It was sometime during that winter. That following spring, just as to try, we followed it in the spring. It was sometime in March or April before the green up was complete. We came in here and burned it. And then the following fall in September, this is part of the grant money too. We put a herbicide treatment on it, which was chopper and garlon as well. And we had a skidder that came in here, and it had a tank, and it just sprayed out. And if you'll look out here, there's hardwoods out here, and there's some that's alive and some that's dead. What happened was the chemicals that we put out really worked on the hardwoods, and we had to leave spots to keep from, so it wouldn't kill every hardwood. But that's why we don't have any of the Yopon coming back to the degree that it would if we hadn't sprayed it. Just coming in here and mulching it would not have done the job. It would have just sprouted back from the roots, and it would have probably took it about 6 months, and it'd been 15 feet tall again. But as far as, and I just want you to understand, I'm not saying that mulching and herbicides are going to replace prescribed fire. It's an alternative because, prescribed fire is a lot cheaper. $175 to $250 for mulching, and then you got from $75 to $90 for the spray treatment. That can get expensive. Whereas you're doing prescribed fire for, say, $25 an acre. But there's places that you can't prescribe burn. And there's going to be more and more of those places in the future. A lot more of them. And I just wanted y'all to see kind of what we had done here.
Cause of smoke hazard?
Smoke hazards, you just got with our organization, we call it the wildland-urban interface. There's more and more people, and it's harder and harder to burn. Whenever we come out and we burn an area, we have to develop a plan on it. And we have to go through procedures as far as getting approval to burn it. And then we have to get the right weather. And if we ain't got it, we can't burn it. And, people like Bobby, myself, Chris, Mike, we've got a license. And if something went haywire, it's our license that we're dealing with. So, there's just times when you can't burn. And like right now, one of our problems is it's too dry to burn. Another problem we've got too much going on. We don't have the manpower. So it's just getting harder and harder to burn.
What about a landowner? And he's thinking about, well, I need to clear my land because I want to do all this stuff. I just set a match to it. What would he do?
Well, I wouldn't set a match.
I'm saying, what would the procedure be? I know people who have just done that.
What I would do is, if I was thinking about burning, as I would in Geneva County, you'd contact Bobby Light at their office. And you can go online, and we've got, or the Forestry Commission's got a website, and there's all kinds of contact information on there, depending on where you live.
And the first thing is, if you don't sell timber on a regular basis, the best thing you can do is hire, or at least get some advice from a professional forester, a consultant forester, registered forester. Often, with our job too, we'll have folks come by and say, yeah, somebody stopped by, I had a couple of trees dying in my plantation, and so-and-so stopped by and said, well, the bugs is eating it up, and you need to clear cut it. And we go out there, and it's just a few black turpentine beetles in a tree, and it may kill 3 or 4, but that's just part of nature. And they don't need to do that. So before you cut timber, contact a professional forester, not a logger, not a timber buyer, but a professional forester. And with us working with the state, we have no interest at all, whether as far as financially, whether you sell your timber or not. We have interest that you don't get taken or you don't do it wrong, but we don't have any financial interest in it. So we can give you our unbiased opinion on what you need to do, but we can't sell the timber for you. That's a consultant forester's job. So first thing is hire or contact a consultant forester. And part of this too is with selling timber, you need to have a management plan. You need to have a plan there before you put the first chainsaw or the first feller buncher out there on the ground. You come up with a plan. What you're wanting to do with that, and if you have that plan before you cut, that can affect the way that you go, the weight or wind or what kind of timber set you may have. So have a plan, whether preferably it should be written. And if you do have a plan, that's the best time to go back and review your plan and update your plan is right before you sell your timber. Make sure that plan is still a valid plan. And with certain programs like treasure forest, tree farm, even carbon sequestration, you have to have a plan in order to be one of those, in that program. And so, every time you go to sell timber, if you don't do it on a yearly basis or annual basis, at least when you look at selling timber, go back and review your plan and update it. Once you have decided to sell, don't just kind of throw it out there. You need to do some planning, some pre-planning on it. There again, like out here, you want to know what's out there. It may be part of that consultant forester's job. If you're going to do a lump sum sale, he goes out, he does the proofs on it so that you know what you have out there. So whenever you put it up for bids, the bids coming in, you'll know, whether you should take those bids or no sell them. And timber prices, that they fluctuate wildly. So you need to know what the timber prices are doing. But plan your harvest. Plan where you're going to put your loading decks. Aesthetics is one of the things that we encourage folks to do with their forest. It's not just picking up the garbage or planting a few showy trees, but planning where your logging deck's going to go. Usually that's going to be the ugliest part of the logging operation is where that deck is. So don't put it right there where you look at it every day when you leave your house. Put it somewhere. It's still got to be accessible to the road and convenient for them to skid to, but try to pick a place that's not visible to the public or that you see every day, because it's going to take it will heal over in a couple of years, and a lot of times you can use that for wildlife openings, so that the next time you harvest, you still have those, you use those same areas. But that's part of pre-planting. Just like with BMPs, BMPs are very important, best management practices. If you have a stream on your property, you know, those are mandatory BMPs there if you start crossing that stream. So you have to know, you know, the BMPs and make sure that's part of your pre-planning. Then, you know, with the person, if you, either you're doing it or if you hire a consultant, decide how you want to sell that thing. You know, this was sold lump sum, which went out there, this was marked, and they marked the trees that was going to keep, everything else was to come out. And then they sent it out for bid, so this was a lump sum bid. The other way you can do it is you negotiate, and it can be on, you know, if it's, and normally negotiations done where if you have a relationship with a dealer or a company, you may negotiate a per ton price where whatever they cut to put on the truck and hauled out, and you get paid, you know, your part of it. Lump sum bid, you know, if they overpaid, then you may make more money, but if they underpaid, then you may not make as much. So you have to look at what your options are. And that's where that consultant forester can help you decide whether you want to do a lump sum or you want to do a per unit or negotiated sale. And if you have a lot of poles in it, like this would have, sometimes, you know, a negotiated sale may be better than a lump sum because the pole market is up and down too, but usually it holds its value more than logs do. So it may be that, you know, you can negotiate with that pole company and get a better price. But when you do that, and kind of get into selling actual prices, if you have a lot of poles and you're taking the poles out, and a lot of times the log company, if they're not the same company, aren't going to pay you as much as they would if you're not taking poles. Because on poles is where they normally, if they're selling or if they're cutting them into lumber, they get their overrun on the poles because the poles are straight. They don't have as much defects, so they get. That's where they make, you know, money as a logging company or a sawmill on buying those poles, type trees. Whereas the pole mill, you know, it's going to pay you more per ton. That takes a better tree. So you got to. That's a trade-off you have to look at. That's why you have to know what's out there. And normally it's better to sell your poles even if you do get a lower price on your logs. If you have, that goes back to how much volume you have. If you just have a few loads, it may not be worth it. But if you have 100 loads, it makes a big difference. Then probably the biggest thing we get into when it's with the legal part is a contract. Like I said, when we took a so-called timber theft case to a DA, the first thing he asked was there a contract. If there's no contract, he didn't even want to talk to us. So, you know, I bought timber for 8 years after I got out of college and run a pole mill, and I bought timber, and I probably out of 100 or more timber deals, I have probably only 2 contracts we ever, you know, actually signed. But, you know, we had a family business, everybody knew us, and, you know, it was a handshake type thing. That was, of course, 25, 30 years ago, so things have changed. But now, you know, we recommend that if you're going to sell, you have a contract. And in that contract is where you specify what's going to happen on your property. We get a lot of complaints that, well, you know, they just ruined my property. They just left stuff everywhere, you know, and they said they were going to do a good job. And we go out there, and I look and say, well, where's the problem? You know, and the logging crew did a great job. They did what they were supposed to, but as you see, they left a lot of debris out there, and that landowner thought that it was going to be like a park when they got through. You know, he just didn't have the understanding of what was going to be there. So, you know, a contract hopefully would, you know, help. It may not help that situation. That's kind of an extreme situation, but in that contract, you spell out your BMPs. You spell out what happens if they cut trees they're not supposed to. You spell out, you know, if they damage the road, or if you need a stream crossing put in, you know, it can be part of the contract, or actually it can even be on the prospectus. If you're going to lump sum it, you can put that in as part of your prospectus that, you know, along with this sale, you've got to put in a stream crossing that meets the federal BMPs. And that, you know, of course, that means you're going to get less money for your timber, but because they can't put in that crossing for free, you know, so they're going to back that out of your timber, but you know it's going to be done properly. instead of you, not saying you don't know what you're doing, but some landowners just think you can go out there and do certain things and you can't. So just the contract is really what makes it truly a timber sale, and then you have some legal recourse if something goes wrong. And like I said, I'm not going to go over everything here because we wouldn't have the time. But then once you have the contract done, and the timber sold, normally the contract's going to be signed. If it's a lump sum, contract signed after the bid opening has been held. Then you still want to monitor. You don't want to just turn it over and say, okay, y'all go to it. Just like out here, Chris and Daryl, when they were out here logging, they were out here every day. And not getting on anybody, but just like me, if I know my daddy was going to be there every day, we was out picking, tomatoes for truck farming, I knew we were going to make sure we picked them right and that we did what we were supposed to. If I knew he wasn't going to be there, we might slack off a little bit. So, it's human nature. So monitor that contract, the logging operation. Just because you sold it, whether, like I said, it was lump sum or negotiated, make sure they're not cutting trees that they wasn't supposed to cut. Make sure, if you sold it on a negotiated, then you need to make sure that they're merchandising it right, that they're not hauling poles to the sawmill. If you sold it lump sum, then what they do with it, once they put it on the truck, they can take poles to the pulpwood yard because it's sold to them, as long as they're just cutting what was actually theirs to cut. So the different selling types really depends. You have more involvement. So if it's lump sum, you still need to be out here monitoring, making sure they're not cutting what they're not supposed to be, and that they're maintaining the roads and that sort of thing. But if you do a negotiated sale, then it's really very important that you or your consultant forester or somebody is out here, on the site. And it don't have to be sitting there, every time they're here, just watching what they're doing. Just, come by, check on them once a day. It could be every 2 days. And then once they, most loggers aren't going to resent the fact that you're out there. I've talked to a lot. I know when I was out, logging, running a crew, I wanted the landowner to come out because I wanted feedback from him or her to make sure that what we were doing was what they wanted, because I wanted to come back again 6 or 8 years later and cut it again. If it's something like uneven age management where you're cutting it every 6 or 7, 8, 10 years. So, or even if not that, the next sale they had, you want to come back. So most of the time, if the logger is doing, or the timber buyer is doing what he's supposed to do, he's not going to mind you out there checking on him. And ask. He may even be looking for that feedback. But after you monitor the harvest, like I said, scale tickets. If you sell it on a negotiated where you're getting paid by the unit, whether it's by the ton for poles or pulpwood or saw logs, chip and saw, canner wood, chips, there's numerous different products. Well, you should be getting copies of the tickets every week of what's being sold. The mill's going to provide that timber buyer with the printout too. But you should have a copy of everything that he has as far as the scale tickets of what was taken, by what product, and then you just can kind of balance that out, and that's what you can use. If you had a cruise prior to the sale, you kind of use that to gauge, see if it's much, and it's not going to be much.
problems with the ecosystem, like we're trying to work with the landowner there. Typically the treatment to get rid of them is copper sulfate. And you try to put in a high enough concentration of copper sulfate to kill the snails, but not kill the fish. That's kind of a balance in that. We checked it again. This was last fall when we found it, and we helped get the pond treated. We went back and checked it last week and only found one live one, which is better, but it's still not good. We won't get rid of all of them because this creek, or this pond, drains into a little bit larger creek that's only about a 4-mile course down to the Pea River. And we'd really, if they get out in the Pea River, they're kind of the cat's out of the bag then. But it's just, it's just another example of an exotic that doesn't have to be introduced. I mean, you look at terrestrial, we got kudzu, you got fire ants, all that exotic species that are real problems. And the main reason exotics are such a problem is because they don't have natural predators, in the area they're introduced. These, I'm sure maybe raccoons might eat these, but more than likely they're not going to be able to eat them enough to keep them from getting to be a problem and get these widespread. These usually eat, like I said, aquatic vegetation, and that's something that, if they really got to be a high population of them, they could have effects on, waterfowl not having food in the rivers and all that. So we really want to try to keep them out. And that's why we always encourage everybody not to dump, an aquarium or even a bait bucket or something like that when they get through fishing. Don't dump it back in the water. I know nobody wants to kill animals, but it's still better if you just get rid of the bait by pouring it out, and not, because there's some species of fish called roach and rudd that look a lot like little crappie minnows when they're small. And they have been introduced by people dumping bait buckets in places. Known exotic fish that we have in the state now, y'all probably seen on some of the TV channels, the silver and the big head carp, the Asian carp. They're closely related to the grass carp, or what they call white amur. And right now it's still legal in Alabama to use grass carp in your ponds, and people use them a lot because they're a very effective weed control in a small body of water. They've even used them for hydrilla control at Lake Eufaula, which is very strong opinions on both sides of the Corps of Engineers doing that, but I won't get into that right now. But the grass carp are very good at weed control because usually you stock them at a real young size. They'll be 9 or 10 inches long, like after they're about 6 months old. You want to have them that big so that bass in the pond won't eat them. But they're usually really good. If you put a high enough rate in to eat the weeds faster than the weeds are growing, they can keep weeds out of a pond for 6, 7, 8 years. But once they get real big, they're like most animals. Their feed efficiency gets to a point where they're just not eating a lot of weeds, and the weeds grow a lot faster than they're eating them, and they're not good for control past usually about 7 years. But that's something that we allow people to use in the state, because typically with grass carp, they have to have a long stretch of free-flowing river before their eggs can be viable for hatching. And we really, the Choctawhatchee is the only free-flowing river that doesn't have a dam on it all the way down to the dam, or to the bay at Destin there. And so we really haven't seen any evidence of grass carp reproduction. But still, the potential's there, and I've got a feeling with the way that people are really pushing away from exotics and getting more toward natives, that probably it'll get where you can't get just regular grass carp put in your pond. There'll have to be triploid grass carp, which is mostly what all the private hatcheries are stocking now. Triploid grass carp, their eggs have gone through a temperature change process to where even though they could hatch the eggs out and grow out the triploid grass carp, they're not able to reproduce. Even if they had the perfect conditions, they're sterile. They can't reproduce. So even if they're in the pond and they get out after a flood or something, we're trying them, and usually what happens is you get a flood and they get out of the hatchery ponds and they get in the wild. We found them in the Alabama River, and even the Tennessee River some, but not very many. I don't think we have a problem with them like they do up north in the Ohio River, where you see the films of where they're just jumping everywhere. Another exotic that people raise, especially around here in Geneva County, are tilapia. And tilapia have been really pushed as a forage species for trying to grow out bigger bass. And it works to a point. If you've got a pond that's already crowded up with little small stunted bass and you put tilapia in there, usually all the tilapia reproduction will be eaten up by all those little bass, and you won't get a lot of benefit from it. But if your bass population is low enough and you put the tilapia in, the thing about tilapia is when the water gets cool, usually in the 60s, they get real sluggish and slow. And the bigger bass can really feed on them and grow out on them. But then on a typical winter, when the water temperatures get down in the 50s, they die out. And so that's why there's no state regulation against stocking tilapia in private ponds, because usually they're going to die out on a normal winter. Now I know that this past winter, several ponds that I'm aware of, they didn't die out, and they're still in there because it's just such a mild winter. But typically, you know, the only wild population that I'm aware of, we had some in a little creek called Gin Creek in the Lake Eufaula. There was some tilapia bedding in there, but once we had a pretty cold winter, they were gone. We couldn't find them anymore. But that's some of the exotic species that I just wanted to recap a little bit. Yes, sir.
Are the tilapia the same as Nile perch?
Yes, sir. Nile perch is a variety of it. There's many different varieties of tilapia, blue tilapia and nilotica and all that. But yeah, the Nile perch is a common name for them. And a lot of people that are trying to raise some really big bass, you know, they're big into stocking them in the spring because they reproduce really, really heavy. Yeah. And then in the fall, when that water gets cool, they'll get real sluggish and slow, and the bass just eat them up. But, you know, there again, it's one of those deals where if you've already got a bass crowded pond, you're just wasting your money because all those little bass are going to eat them up most of the time, not really grow out on them. But any questions about, you know, exotic species? Yes, ma'am.
How do you, I mean, do y'all come out and look at ponds? We have a pond, and we've lived there for about 12 years, and I know the former owners put the white amoras in there.
Right.
We've got them.
Yeah, they grow out huge.
They're giant. I mean, what do you do with them?
Well, they're not really hurting anything. A lot of people do not like white amora because they feel like, you know, they're in the pond, they're digging up all my brim beds, they're causing a problem, they're muddying up the pond. And, you know, they get a bad reputation from that because of common carp. Common carp are another exotic actually from Europe, you know, the old orange carp like you see in the river. You never want to get those in your pond if you can help it, because they burrow in the mud and they keep your pond muddy, and they do dig through the brim beds and all that. They're a real problem. The grass carp or the white amora, they don't dig in the mud like that. They mainly eat vegetation. They will eat a little fish every once in a while because you'll even catch one on a lure every once in a while. But when they're big like that, they're not hurting a whole lot. The biggest pain that they can be is if you're trying to feed your fish. They love fish food like candy.
Yeah.
And they'll just knock the brim and the catfish out of the way, and they're like a vacuum cleaner.
You chum the water, and the kids love it.
Right. And if you're not too...
B? Is that your husband?
Yes.
He's a handsome man. So, do you own land around here?
In Coffee Springs.
Coffee Springs? Okay, did you learn anything here today?
Oh yeah, plenty.
Have you ever been here before?
Yes, we have been.
Okay, have you ever come over here just for recreation?
No, just to experience and to find out what this is all about.
Oh, okay. You plan on coming back?
Oh, we certainly will. We have a grandson coming in tomorrow, and we would like to bring him over here or them to hopefully discover an alligator.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you guys later. And thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great time here in the Geneva State Forest. And those guys, they knew what they were talking about, didn't they? And it was a great tour. Thanks a lot, guys. And the lunch was fantastic. Well, we'll see you later here in the great outdoors.